Hi, welcome. Here's your HMH lesson 7.9. We are going to start off by reviewing prefixes. We're going to do this, but we're going to be using our worksheet that's inside of your reading packet, page 196. We're going to do this together and talk about this together so no one is confused. And then we're going to be reading the stories he tells on page 64 in your HMH book. All right, so let's get started. Prefix pre. The prefix pre means before. Use the meaning of the prefix and the base word. Base word is the same as root word. In Saxon, they call it root word. In HMH, they call it base word, but it's the same thing. Use the base word or root word to figure out the meaning of the new word. If you are not sure about the meaning of the base word or the meaning of the root word, you can look the word up in a dictionary. Use the words and phrase it in parentheses. Those are parentheses, these little things that the words go in between, those are called parentheses. Use the words in parentheses to write a word with the prefix pre to complete each sentence. So Mom will pre-sort our clothes before she puts them in the washer, or Mom will before our clothes. Pre-sort, she will pre-sort them. Pre means before, guys. So or prior to, or I'm sorry, before doing so. So Mom will pre-sort our clothes before she puts them in the washer. So you're going to write pre-sort. Pre, and then sort. S-O-R-T. Let's look at the next one. I like to look at the pre-dawn sky, or I like to look at the before sky. The pre-dawn. That means before dawn. Because what color is the sky before dawn? Before the sun goes down, what color is it? It starts to become light orange and pink and purple. Mr. Munoz will approve our plan for the project or pre-approve. He will pre-approve. You always want to get pre-approval before doing something because you don't want to do it and go through all the trouble and then it not being okay to do. Pre-approve. And I know that because this is our plan, right? They didn't do it yet. It's not our project. It's our plan for the project. The sandwiches in the cafeteria were pre-made. That means they were made before we got there. Pre-made. You have to write pre-made. All right, if you blink the oven, it will be warm. Preheat. That means heat it before. You always, when you bake a cake or something, on the box it says preheat the oven. That means turn on, before you start doing anything, turn the oven on, let it start heating up. All right. Nate blanked for the tickets to the game. When you pay before, you prepaid. So Nate prepaid. So when he got there, he didn't have to pay again. Okay. Lilia settles into her seat before the flight. Lilia settles into her seat pre-flight. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so now in your HMH book on page 64, we're going to read this biography. Biographies tell about real people's lives. As you read the stories, he tells the story of Joseph Bruschak. Notice details and events in the person's life, events in order from earliest to latest, and photos of the person. So before we read to make smart, we're going to be reading to make smart guesses or inferences. Remember, we talked about inferences. Inferences are things the author does not say, but gives you clues in the story, in the words, and in the pictures to help you understand. So let's look at this, making inferences. When you make inferences, you use clues to make smart guesses about something the author doesn't tell you. So clues from the story plus what I already know equals, everyone? Inference. So let me say that again. Clues from the story plus what I already know equals inference. Very good. Okay. So the power words, we have ashamed, elders, overflowing, and pride. Let's look at the word ashamed. The dog looks like he's ashamed of what he did. What did he do, everyone?
He threw down the garbage.
Good. He knocked down the garbage and made a mess. He's ashamed. When you are ashamed, you feel bad about doing something you have done. So he's ashamed. He feels bad. Elders. Here this little girl is talking to, it looks like her grandpa maybe, right? So elders are people who are older than you, right? Have you ever heard respect your elders? That means respect anyone that is older than you. All right. Overflowing. They're filling up the cup and it is overflowing. If something is overflowing, no more can fit in it. No more water is going to fit in that glass. It is overflowing. Last one, pride. The little girl is smiling with pride. She's cute. And she's picking up trash. When you feel pride, you are pleased about something you did well. She's pleased and happy that she's helping the earth and the environment by picking up trash. Very nice. Okay, let's stop there with the vocabulary words and let's meet James Bruschak. I think I totally messed up his name, but let's listen. I think we're going to listen. Uh-oh, technical difficulties. Hold on. Okay, got it to work.
Bruschak has many different hobbies. James Bruschak has many different
Bruschak. See, told you I was going to mess up his name. All right, let's listen.
hobbies. He has studied martial arts since he was 10 years old. He even has a black belt in karate. Mr. Bruschak knows a lot about the wilderness and wild animals, too. He teaches kids and adults how to survive in the woods. He also tells exciting stories about Native American history. He enjoys performing at festivals all over the country. Many of these stories appear in his books, too. When you read the stories he tells, you will discover how Mr. Bruschak's work is a part of family tradition. The stories he tells. The story of Joseph Bruschak by James Bruschak. Illustrations by Brendan Kearney.
You're right, Haney. That might be his brother or his relative because they both have the same last name. All right, let's read.
Joseph Bruschak III was born on October 16, 1942. He was born in Saratoga Springs, New York. His parents' names were Joseph Jr. and Marion Flora Bowman. Joseph grew up in Greenfield Center, New York. That is in the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains. Joseph in second grade. Joseph was raised by his mother's parents. His grandfather was an Abenaki Indian. He had a strong love for animals and nature. His grandmother was one of the first women to ever graduate from Albany Law School. She liked books and learning. Albany Law School.
Who were the most important people in Joseph's early life? Who did they talk about in this? His grandparents. Very good. Because who did he live with? He lived with his grandparents. Very good. What do you think Joseph learned from them? What did he say? He learned to love nature and animals. Very good. And he learned that reading is important. It's a really important part of your life. All right, let's keep going.
Joseph's grandparents ran a small general store and gas station right next to the house where he grew up. The store was on one of the main roads into the Adirondack Mountains. As a boy, Joseph loved to hear all of the stories and tall tales told by the people who came into the store.
Stop right there for a second. How does the genre of the story help you identify the topic? What is the genre? What is the genre of this story? What did we say it was? Was it a fairy tale? It was a biography. It's a story of someone's life. A biography gives information about a person's life. That tells me the topic of the text is about Joseph. All right, let's see. What did you learn about where Joseph lived as a young boy? Where did he live?
With his grandparents.
Yeah, but where with his grandparents? In Mars?
No!
He grew up in Greenfield Center, New York. He lived with his grandparents in a house that was next to the general store and gas station his grandparents ran. What effect did where Joseph lived have on his life? Where did he spend most of his time? In the store. Very good. In the general store that's next to their house, because that's where his grandparents worked. He wasn't going to stay home alone. And the people who came into the store told him stories and tall tales that Joseph loved to hear. All right. Moving on. What details in this picture help us understand more about where Joseph grew up? Why does the picture help us understand more? Look, where's the general store? This is the general store, and this is his house. It's right next to his house. Very good. The house and the store are surrounded by grass and tall trees. The road that runs by the store looks pretty small, even though it's a main road. This helps me understand that Joseph did not grow up in the city. He grew up in the country. Very good. Let's keep going.
Joseph's family's general store. There were not many children out in the country where Joseph lived. Because of this, he often played by himself in the forest. Sometimes he would walk by Grandpa Jesse's side. Grandpa Jesse taught Joseph a lot about animals, nature, and gardening. He never spoke much about his Native American background. Grandpa Jesse and his family and other Native Americans had been treated badly. Joseph and his grandfather.
I read that Joseph often played by himself in the forest because not many children lived nearby. I also read that Joseph's grandfather taught him about animals and nature. That tells me that when Joseph played by himself in the forest, he was in a place he liked to be. I think Joseph enjoyed the time he spent playing in the forest because he liked animals and nature. When I was young, I used my imagination a lot when I played by myself. I wonder if Joseph used his imagination to make up stories about the animals in the forest. Possible, right? All right.
Grandpa Jesse said he left school when he was in 4th grade. Why? He was being called mean names. Hearing such family stories made Joseph feel sad. It also made him want to learn more. He wanted to learn the stories and traditions his grandfather was too ashamed to share. Joseph's grandmother passed on to him a love of school. With this, Joseph went to college at Cornell University. While in college, he began to learn everything he could learn about Native American ways and beliefs. As an adult, Joseph traveled the country meeting Native American elders. These elders gladly shared their stories and traditions with him.
And here they have a picture of, what is this? No, this is Cornell University. This is the university or the college that he attended. He went to. Why do you think Grandpa Jesse was being called mean names? Why was he being called mean names? Yes, Leah? Very good. And I read that his grandfather was too ashamed to share stories and traditions. Maybe because he's Native American. I know that Joseph's grandfather was a Native American from Abenaki Indians. I think that Grandpa Jesse may have been called mean names because he was different than some of the other children. How did Joseph feel about what happened to his grandfather? And what did he do as a result? Did that make Joseph feel good? It made Joseph feel sad, and as a result, he wanted to learn more about Native Americans and the ways in their beliefs. All right, let's keep going.
Cornell University. Joseph and his wife Carol met in college. They married and had 2 sons named James and Jesse. Joseph was overflowing with stories that he would often retell to his 2 sons. Before long, Joseph began to share the stories with others outside the family. Times had changed a lot since Grandpa Jesse left school. Now when Joseph told the stories, people listened and were interested. They felt Joseph's retellings were important. They respected him. Joseph also began to write stories in books. Joseph sharing stories.
What is this part of the story mostly about? Okay, and his love for learning about the Native American background. It made him a good storyteller, right? He told his stories and he learned from a lot of Native American elders. He shared these stories outside the family, then he wrote the stories in books. He became known as a Native American storyteller. Very cool.
In just a few years, Joseph Bruschak became known all across the world as a Native American storyteller. He has won many awards for his storytelling. Joseph has also written more than 120 books of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. Most of the books are about Native Americans. Joseph connects with audiences around the world.
What do you notice about the visuals that are on each page? On each page, there's a picture of Joseph or something from his life. The other visual is always an illustration of an area with woods and animals. Why do you think the author includes a photo of an illustration on each page? And how do these pictures help us understand the story? The pictures give us true information about the story, guys. It gives us true information about his life. The illustration on each page helps me imagine the stories that Joseph is telling.
Growing up, learning about Native American traditions, James and Jesse are also storytellers. Joseph's oldest son, James, is also a wilderness and tracking expert. His younger son, Jesse, teaches the Abenaki language. James at work. Jesse, James, and Joseph Bruschak.
So are these his brothers or his sons? His sons. Very good. On this page, the author says that Joseph's sons are named James and Jesse, and that they're storytellers just like Joseph. Reading that reminds me that Joseph's grandpa was also named Jesse. I can infer that Joseph wanted to honor his grandfather by naming his son after him. I noticed something else too. The author of this story is named James Bruschak, just like Joseph's older son. I'll bet Joseph's son, James, is the author. So who's the author of the story? James, his son. Why do you think that Joseph's son, Jesse, teaches the Abenaki language? Because his father was an Abenaki Indian. I think Jesse learned the language because he was interested in Grandpa Jesse's traditions. I think he teaches it so that he can keep sharing the Native American traditions with everyone. All right, let's keep going.
Joseph still lives in the house where he grew up. He writes and shares stories almost every day. He takes extra pride in seeing a love for stories continue to his grandkids. He and his sons continue to help pass along these once hidden traditions to future generations. Joseph and his grandchildren.
That's a picture of Joseph and his grandchildren. Generations are groups of people who were all born and lived around the same time. Your grandparents are from one generation. Your parents are from another generation. And you are from the generation after that. Very nice. All right, let's talk just a little more and then we'll be done. Use details from the stories. He tells the story of Joseph Bruschak to answer these questions. Why is passing on traditions important to Joseph? Very good, because it's part of his family tradition, and he feels that the Native Americans and the Indians and his family traditions were very important to him, right? Why did the author write the story? Very good, to tell about Joseph's father. He wrote the story to tell about his father's life. Very good. Think about what the texts and photos tell you about Joseph Bruschak. What qualities do you think a person needs to be a great storyteller? What do you think somebody needs to be a great storyteller, Leah? What makes a good storyteller? Brenaya? Okay, but we said storyteller, not a story writer. What makes you a good storyteller, Rena? Good, maybe by reading the ideas in a nice way. If I read a book like this, would I be a good storyteller? If I read the book like this, will I be a really good storyteller? Yeah, so maybe somebody with expression, maybe somebody that's passionate about what they do. They love what they do. They feel good about how the stories. They are excited to do so. Maybe that's what makes up a good storyteller, right? All right, very good. That's all we're doing now. You guys, let's see. Actually, I might ask you to write. Let's see. Now write a letter to Joseph. Ask him questions about his life and work. Tell which fact about his life is most interesting to you. Yeah, that's fine. We're not going to do this. All right, that's it. That's all we're doing today. So, that's it. You can put your things away. All right, bye guys. See you later.